Joey for Witches of the Moon. I'm your Tuesday host, and today's subject is familiars. And in short, is my familiar. His name is Salem. He's fluffy. He's amazing. He's not really my familiar. It's a joke, everybody breathe. Basically, I'm not allowed any animals where I'm living, so currently I don't work with animals in the familiar sense. So the idea of a familiar is an interesting one that comes from history, and a lot of the time when we hear references to familiars, it's actually in really negative terms. There was a lot of killing of animals believed to be witches' familiars, and the sources through history, describe them bashing cats' heads in and all sorts. It's actually one of the ironies of history that it's quite likely that the murdering of cats is what actually led to the Black Death being such a profound and devastating disease back in medieval times. So the idea in modern terminology of a familiar is that you work with an animal whom you have a connection with, and they can bolster your relationship with spirit, or they can bolster your relationship with the divine. And a lot of us tap into animal magic in a lot of different ways, whether or not we have what is frequently known as a familiar. And in this video I'm going to be moving a little bit away from the term familiar and talking more about animal magic, because the term familiar is very restrictive and has come to sort of mean, usually within modern practices, sort of household pet type animals. So, a cat or a dog generally. There are people who work with other animals, and there are other animals which are frequently associated with witches. Toads is one throughout history. Owls is more popular now as a sort of, with the Harry Potter influx of modern understanding and references, if you like, reference points for people outside of witchcraft. So growing up, I was surrounded by animals a lot of the time. I was surrounded by cats and dogs, and we had some mice at one point, and I think that's it, apart from maybe fish. And I've always connected with cat energy a lot easier than any other energy. I had a dog that was very loyal to me and I loved her very much, but with cats, for me, there is something mystical about them. It's one of these things that we perhaps just feel rather than knowing exactly where that comes from. There is modern cultural references to cats all the time. They are the most known witches' familiar. They are in all the movies and things. They are sometimes in movies that are outside of witches, but they have that spiritual connection. So, for example, in Constantine, he says cats are good anyway, they're half in, half out of the spiritual realms. And for me, I've always connected most easily with cats. I had a cat when I was younger called Guinness, who was black with green eyes, and your very stereotypical witch's cat. And there was something about his and my connection that was just beyond the normal connection. And I just he was just my cat. That's how I used to think of it. He was mine, I was his. That was just how the connection worked, and that at its basic core is what the familiar thing is about. You have a connection with an animal. They are yours, you are theirs, and there is a bond, and that bond sort of echoes throughout the universe perhaps. That spiritual energy connection is special and helps you become a better person, a better witch. You don't have to be a witch to have a strong animal bond with animals, and this is why the term familiar to me seems constrictive and sometimes has that negative connotation because of the history of, death surrounding it and aggression from those who wanted to, harm them. In modern culture, we have a very interesting relationship with animals, and they are incredibly connected to the world around us. Animal magic rather than familiar magic is something I think everybody can easily recognize and embrace a lot more easily than having one connection with one animal. That's a special relationship which you may or may not encounter in your journey. At the current time, I cannot encounter that in my journey because mundane reasons forbid it. So for me, animal magic in a very broader sense is a lot more poignant to me at this time in my path. That being said, of course, the animal that springs to mind right now is crows and ravens. They are everywhere. Since I have developed my relationship with the Morrigan, and as more things develop and as I continue down the path, they are everywhere. We went out to the farm shop on Saturday or Sunday, and they were everywhere, and they were so close. I could have reached out and touched some of them. They were that close, and they were massive. And I wrote it all down, and I looked into it, and I looked for the hidden messages, and I looked for clues and things began to sort of sing in symphony to me. This is what this means, and this is what you find, and you suddenly come across information about crows that you didn't see in a way before, and that enlightens you into something, and it clicks something in your mind, turns a switch on, and you start to understand and appreciate the symbolism, the imagery, the energy behind that connection, and you then start to connect to the energy of the animal in question, in my case crow or raven. Now, you know, in terms of animal magic, it's not always the animal that you can see. Some people have a really strong, profound connection with animals that they can't possibly go out and touch. The orca whale, or whales in general, sea creatures when you don't live anywhere near the sea. You know, certain animals speak to people in a profound way, and then you have the idea of totem animals, which I've covered in depth on my own channel, and there are spirit guides in animalistic, shamanistic form, because sometimes it's easier for us to connect with spirit guides in the form of animals than it is in the form of people, and that is hugely popular in modern spiritual culture, to go searching for an animal spirit guide rather than a person. And it could just be a symbolic representation of a spirit, so it could in fact, you know, be a human spirit in animal form, but we just feel more comfortable with animal guides, which is a really interesting glimpse into the human psyche, that we might trust animals a lot easier than we trust people. There is something more honest, something more integral about animals to us than there is about human beings. We see them as more instinctual. You know, we don't see the predatory side of animals as in a negative light, where if you called a human a predator, it would be a negative thing, because humans are supposed to have moved beyond harming others for predatory need. You know, animals in the animal kingdom are seen as surviving, and there is cruelty in the animal kingdom, but because it's animals, we somehow disconnect it, which is, it's a fascinating thing, which I'm sure there is a whole ton of psychology behind it, and is far more than I can cover in this video. So it's interesting how we develop symbolism with certain animals, we develop relationships with certain animals, and then we sort of put our feelings and interpretations into certain animals. So certain animals we associate with certain things. We associate lions with courage, for example. We associate dogs with loyalty. Some of these are very human emotions, for connections put onto animals. Is it necessarily that all lions are brave? Probably not, and it's a very humanistic way of looking at animal behaviour anyway. But that says more about the person than it does about the animal, and the way that we embrace animal totems, animal guides, animal magic in general is a fascinating subject. It really is, and it's well worth further investigation if you feel a really strong connection with certain animals. I've known people, and I know people, excuse me, who almost have an animal spirit within them because they are so connected to their particular animal. I know one lady, and she's a youngish lady and she's married, and she's so connected with cats, so it's unreal, and she rescues them and looks after them, and you know, she has protected them, and it's just something in her aura, in her very essence, is just cat. And she told me a story, or she told the story on Facebook rather, and a young girl pointed at her and said, "Mummy, mummy, cat." And the mother was like, "Don't be stupid, that's a human," to the daughter. But the lady in question, she understood. She knew that that mother was actually quashing down her daughter's intuition, because she as a person, my friend, is completely in essence cat energy as well as being a human being. And I think that's a very interesting energy dynamic that can be part of all of us. I don't think you have to be a witch at all to engage with animal magic. You know, the way that a cat can purr and make you feel better is a form of magic in itself. The way that, you know, you can take your dog for a walk and seeing how happy and bouncy he is lifts your mood is a form of magic. Watching fish and just feeling completely serene and meditative is a form of magic, and people engage with this all the time. You don't have to be a witch at all, or anything at all. You just have to be a human embracing that experience to experience animal magic. And I think I'm done for this video as far as that, because I don't really want to go into overly specific areas with particular animals. I don't think that's necessary, and I think if anybody wishes to engage with particular animals, then that's a very personal path which you should definitely pursue. Many blessings.